Ladies and gentlemen, we often think love is loud, obvious, expressive, and easy to recognize, but sometimes the deepest kind of love doesn't shout, it whispers, it hides in the smallest gestures. And when it comes from someone who isn't used to emotional closeness, someone avoidant, it rarely comes in the form we expect. Instead of grand declarations, it shows up in moments that look quiet on the outside, but are full of courage underneath. Tonight, I want to talk about that kind of love, the kind that doesn't sweep you off your feet in a rush, but the kind that learns one step at a time how to stay. Because when an avoidant person loves you, it doesn't always look like a movie. But it's real, and the way they show it is through consistent, small risks that say more than words ever could. Vulnerability begins with effort, not perfection. It's one of the most misunderstood truths in modern relationships. We often imagine vulnerability as this big, beautiful, flawless moment, someone standing confidently in front of you, speaking from the heart with poetic clarity and complete emotional control. But the reality, vulnerability rarely looks like that. It's often messy, it's uncertain, it's full of pauses, half sentences, uncomfortable silences, and even awkward eye contact. And that's what makes it real. For someone who's avoidant or simply not used to opening up, vulnerability is like stepping into a foreign country where they don't know the language. It doesn't come fluently, it comes in fragments. They might start a sentence and stop. They might say too little or even too much, but that effort to try to lean in even a little is a door cracking open, and that crack means something. It means they are choosing discomfort over distance. It means they are risking not being perfect just to be seen. That risk is the heartbeat of intimacy. We forget that real connection isn't built on flawless delivery, it's built on sincerity. The person who stumbles through their feelings, who says, "I'm not sure how to say this," or "I've never talked about this before," is doing something deeply brave because they're not rehearsed, they're not polished, they're showing you the raw version of themselves, and that's the most honest version there is. And that honesty, no matter how imperfect, is what forges trust, not because they got the words right, but because they cared enough to show up in the first place. This is especially true when someone has spent a lifetime guarding themselves. Maybe they were taught to stay strong, to never rely on others, or to bottle up pain so tightly that even they forgot it was there. When that person begins to make even the smallest effort to share what's underneath, it's monumental. It might come out clumsy, they might talk in circles, but what they're really saying is, "I care about you enough to let you in, even though it scares me." The mistake we often make is assuming that if someone doesn't express vulnerability the way we expect, or the way we're used to, it doesn't count. We wait for grand gestures. We want the perfect apology, the perfectly timed confession, the crystal clear "I love you." But some people speak through actions, through quiet effort, through the courage it takes just to start a difficult conversation. And sometimes vulnerability looks like them trying at all. Effort is everything. It's the proof that someone is growing, that they're stepping out of what's familiar, that they're willing to be uncomfortable to meet you somewhere in the middle. That's love, not the fantasy version, but the real one. The gritty, uncertain, emotional labor it takes to build something with depth. When someone starts saying things like, "I don't know how to talk about this, but I'm trying, listen closely," that's not weakness. That's not confusion, that's a person reaching for connection, and when someone reaches, even with trembling hands, it's an act of trust. It says, "I want to be close even if I don't know how yet." And that's the beauty of vulnerability. It doesn't demand that we have it all figured out. It asks only that we try, that we let people see the parts we usually hide, that we risk being misunderstood for the chance to be truly known. The moments that change relationships are rarely perfect. They are imperfect attempts made with genuine intention, They are late night confessions, shaky voice messages, unexpected texts that say, "Can we talk?" They are made of softness and bravery and the quiet decision to not run away. Vulnerability isn't about getting it right. It's about showing up. It's about letting someone see what's behind the wall, even if just a glimpse. It's about effort, because in love, effort is never small. It's sacred. Emotional processing happens in silence first. It's a truth that often goes unnoticed, especially in relationships where one person expects immediate communication and resolution. But not everyone processes emotions out loud. Not everyone has the language, speed, or confidence to speak the moment something feels off. For many, especially those with avoidant tendencies or deep emotional wiring, processing is a quiet, internal journey. One that doesn't begin with conversation, but with solitude. Silence is often mistaken for avoidance, for coldness, for indifference, but in reality, silence can be a sign that something is happening beneath the surface. Something thoughtful, something vulnerable. When someone pulls back after a conflict or withdraws during moments of tension, it doesn't always mean they don't care. It might mean they care so much that they don't want to say the wrong thing. It might mean their emotions are louder than their words, and they need time to translate what they're feeling into something that makes sense, even to themselves. There are people who need space, not to distance themselves from you, but to understand what just happened within themselves. They need time to make sense of the emotional noise, to sort out what's real from what's reactive. They think before they speak because they don't want to hurt, confuse, or escalate. That pause is not rejection, it's regulation. It's a moment to breathe, to gain clarity, and to eventually return with more calm and less chaos. Emotional processing in silence isn't about hiding. It's about respect, both for themselves and for you. It's the decision not to lash out in the heat of the moment. It's a sign that they're trying to come back with something clearer, something more grounded. Silence, in this case, is not absence, it's effort. Quiet, invisible effort that often goes unseen because we're taught to equate love with immediate expression. The truth is, not everyone grew up in environments where emotions were safe to express. Some learned that speaking up got them punished, shamed, or ignored. So they internalized, they learned to retreat, to reflect in silence, to come to conclusions alone before daring to share them with anyone else. And when these people enter relationships, they carry that process with them. Not because they want distance, but because silence is the only place they've ever felt safe enough to process their truth. In that quiet, something important happens. They replay conversations. They examine tone, words, intentions, theirs and yours. They ask themselves why they felt triggered, or why a certain moment made them shut down. They question whether their reaction was fair, or if it came from a deeper, older wound. That silence is not empty. It's full of internal conversation, emotional sorting, and quiet attempts to grow. When they finally speak, it might not be a speech. It might be one or two lines, a simple "I thought about what you said," or "I realize I didn't handle that well." But those words are the result of deep internal work. And just because it wasn't visible doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Just because it wasn't loud doesn't mean it wasn't profound. People who process in silence often feel misunderstood. They're told they're cold, detached, or emotionally unavailable. But what they really are is careful. They don't want to say things they don't mean. They don't want to add more confusion when they're already unsure, so they give themselves permission to pause. That pause is a sacred part of how they stay emotionally honest. We live in a world that rewards fast responses, quick fixes, and instant clarity. But real emotional growth doesn't happen on demand. It happens in stillness. It happens when someone steps back, reflects, and chooses not to rush just for the sake of being heard. When someone processes in silence, they are actually trying to bring you their best self, not their most reactive one. So when someone goes quiet, don't always assume it's a goodbye. Sometimes it's just a comma, a necessary pause between chapters, a quiet effort to return to you, not with noise, but with meaning. Admitting they miss you is a big deal, especially when it comes from someone who isn't used to expressing their emotions openly, someone who values independence, who's wired to self-protect, who feels more comfortable in control than in vulnerability. For them, saying "I miss you" isn't just a sweet phrase, it's a confession, a risk, a soft place where a wall used to be. There are people who, deep down, equate need with weakness. Somewhere in their life, they learned that depending on others came at a cost. That closeness could mean disappointment, betrayal, or even abandonment. So they taught themselves to never lean too hard, to never show their emotional hunger, to never let anyone know they longed for connection. These are the people who often love in silence, who show care through actions, but struggle to say it in words. So when someone like that looks you in the eye, or even sends a quiet message and says, "I missed you," know that you're witnessing something rare. Not because they don't feel deeply, but because they've spent so long trying not to feel at all. Not because they're cold, but because letting someone know they've taken up emotional space in their world makes them feel exposed. That one sentence reveals more than longing. It reveals trust. It shows that their feelings have grown stronger than their fear of vulnerability. To say "I miss you" is to admit that your presence matters, that your absence was felt, that life, even if only slightly, became less colorful, less grounded, less full without you in it. For someone who normally detaches when things get complicated, saying they miss you is a way of letting their guard down. They're saying, "I noticed you were gone, and I didn't like the way that felt." It might not sound like much to someone who's emotionally expressive. For them, missing someone is easy to say. It flows naturally. But for those who keep emotions under lock and key, this is their version of showing up. It's their way of saying, "You got under my skin," in the best possible way. That sentence carries weight because it costs them something to say it. It means they thought about you, often quietly, probably without telling anyone. It means your memory lingered in their day when you weren't around. And it's not just the phrase itself, it's when and how it's said. If it comes after distance, after a pause, after a silence you didn't quite understand, it becomes even more meaningful. It becomes a bridge between disconnection and reconnection. When someone who pulls away during stress or uncertainty says "I missed you," it's an acknowledgement. It means they thought of you while they were away. It means they felt your absence not just physically, but emotionally. This moment is where emotional growth begins, because to admit you miss someone is to admit you need someone. And for those who have spent years convincing themselves they don't need anyone, this is transformative. It's scary, but it's also healing. It's their way of rewriting an old belief that needing someone doesn't have to end in hurt. That it's okay to feel attached, that it's okay to long for someone who feels safe. So when they say it, don't brush it off, don't minimize it. It may not come wrapped in poetic language or dramatic flair. It may be said quietly, awkwardly, maybe even as a text at midnight, but behind those words is a person standing in unfamiliar territory, someone who is trying to meet you emotionally, even when their instinct is to run the other way. You don't need to ask them to be perfect. You don't need them to write you love letters, but when they say, "I missed you," take a breath. Because that moment is layered with every time they held back, every time they felt and said nothing, every time they loved quietly and hoped it would be enough. This time they're choosing to speak. And in their world, that's a big deal. Their fear of losing you signals deep care. It's easy to misunderstand that fear as insecurity or emotional instability, but in truth, it's often the most honest reflection of how much someone values what they've found in you. For someone who doesn't easily attach, who's spent years building emotional defenses, the thought of losing someone significant is not just a passing anxiety. It's a sign that something real has taken root in them. And that scares them more than they'll ever admit. When someone has developed emotional self-protection, they tend to keep a healthy distance. They avoid relying on others, avoid revealing too much, and stay in control of their emotions. Not because they don't want connection, but because they fear what might happen if they let someone too close. So when that person begins to fear losing you, it means you've broken through their defenses. It means you've reached a place where you matter more than their fear of being vulnerable. This kind of fear doesn't always show up in poetic, romantic ways. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's clumsy. Sometimes it shows up in difficult conversations, defensive tones, or unexpected outbursts. But at the core of it, it's not anger, it's fear. Fear that you'll walk away, fear that they're not good enough. Fear that they finally found something real, and they don't know how to hold on to it. You might hear it in statements like, "I don't want to mess this up." That simple sentence holds layers of unspoken emotion. It's not just about the relationship, it's about their own self-doubt, their awareness of their patterns, and their genuine hope that this time can be different. They've probably lost before relationships, trust, connection, and they carry those losses like silent baggage. When they say they're afraid of losing you, they're not just reacting to this moment. They're reacting to every time life has proven to them that closeness often leads to pain. Their fear is a reflection of the depth to which you've reached them. You're no longer just someone they enjoy spending time with. You're someone who's starting to feel like home, someone whose absence would echo in their day-to-day life. That fear is uncomfortable because it disrupts the illusion of control they've worked so hard to maintain. But it also means they're invested, emotionally, mentally, fully, and yet the fear of loss doesn't always make someone more expressive. Sometimes it makes them retreat, become distant, or overanalyze small things. They might test you, push you, or even question the relationship, not because they want to leave, but because they're scared you might. That push-pull dynamic is often misunderstood. It looks like confusion, but it's an internal war between their need for safety and their desire to hold on to love. If you listen closely, you'll recognize the difference between someone who is trying to control you and someone who is simply afraid of losing you. The former manipulates, the latter wrestles silently with their emotions. The person who fears losing you may not always say it directly, but their actions will show it. The late-night texts, the check-ins, the moments they open up, even when it's hard, the subtle efforts to reconnect after a distance. All of these are signs that they care more than they're used to admitting. That fear might be expressed in moments when they realize they've hurt you, or when they see you pulling away emotionally. It's in their eyes when they ask, "Are we okay?" It's in the shift in their energy when they feel the connection thinning. They might not say, "I'm scared of losing you," but they'll try harder, they'll reach out, they'll reflect, and those efforts, no matter how imperfect, are proof of something deeper stirring within them. To fear the loss of someone means the heart has opened, and for people who aren't used to letting people in, that's a terrifying but beautiful shift. They might not know how to navigate that fear, but the presence of it means something profound. They care. Not just a little, not just conveniently, but deeply enough that the thought of you not being there unsettles them. It reminds them that this is real, and real to them is rare. Love from an avoidant shows in consistent small risks. It rarely arrives in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, it reveals itself in subtle shifts, quiet efforts, and moments that might seem insignificant to anyone else, but are monumental for them. For someone who's built their life around emotional distance and self-reliance, every tiny step toward closeness is a decision, a risk, a leap into the unknown. And when they love you, they start making those leaps more often, even if they're still unsure where they'll land. You may not hear "I love you" in the traditional way. You may not get daily texts or long conversations about feelings, but you'll see them show up in ways that speak volumes. They'll reach out even when their instinct is to retreat. They'll say, "Let me know when you get home," not because it's routine, but because they're trying to stay connected. They'll ask about your day when they're emotionally drained themselves. These aren't habits, they're choices. Intentional moments where they stretch beyond what's comfortable to show you that you matter. It can be hard to notice, especially if you're looking for love in the ways you're used to receiving it. You might miss the meaning in the way they offer to help with something small, or in how they remember a random detail you mentioned weeks ago. You might overlook the way they sit quietly with you when you're upset, even if they don't know what to say. But for them, every one of those moments is layered with effort, not performative effort, but the genuine, quiet kind that only someone who's afraid of vulnerability can understand. These small risks begin to accumulate. They might start opening up about their past, slowly letting you in. Maybe they start saying things like, "I'm not good at this, but I'm trying." That's not just a comment, it's a confession. It's a sign that they're no longer hiding behind emotional detachment. They're allowing themselves to be seen, even if only a little at a time. Every time they choose honesty over withdrawal, every time they stay in a difficult conversation instead of escaping it, they are risking the part of themselves they've always tried to protect. Love from an avoidant isn't loud, but it's steady. It may look inconsistent on the surface, but underneath, it's being built through small, consistent steps, each one pushing just slightly beyond the last. They might take time to warm up, to trust, to believe that you're not going to abandon them the moment they let their guard down. So their love grows in layers, not all at once, but through a slow accumulation of moments where they choose to engage rather than shut down. These are the people who love you by listening more than they speak, by standing next to you when words aren't enough, by trying to show up when their nervous system tells them to run. Their love may not look like fireworks. It might look like a message in the middle of the day just to check in, or the way they say "be safe" with more weight than they know how to explain. These small risks are their version of vulnerability. They're not rehearsed, they're not always consistent, but they're real. Over time, these risks turn into a pattern, a new form of communication that says, "I'm not perfect at this, but I'm here." And that presence, the choice to keep showing up, is what love looks like when it comes from someone who's had to unlearn everything they once believed about closeness. So while others may write love stories with big words and sweeping gestures, an avoidant writes theirs in quiet decisions. In text messages they had to talk themselves into sending, in showing up when every part of them wanted to stay home, in sharing a piece of their world when they could have kept it locked away. Each time they make one of these choices, it's not random. It's love, not the kind they've seen in movies, but the kind they had to build from scratch. The kind that takes courage, patience, and 1,000 small risks just to say, "I care about you, and I'm trying to stay." And so, if you find yourself loving someone who doesn't always know how to express it, watch their effort, watch the small risks they take to meet you halfway, because sometimes love isn't loud or lyrical. Sometimes it's subtle, it's in the hesitation before they speak, it's in the messages they almost didn't send, it's in the quiet ways they stay when leaving would have been easier. Love from an avoidant may not look like what you're used to. But when you learn to see it, not just in words but in bravery. You begin to realize every small risk they take to get closer. That is love, and it's one of the rarest, most honest kinds there is.